right, so excited to have you all here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tasha Blaylock, and I'm one of Trust for Learning's 3 co-directors. I lead our learning and evaluation work, as well as our work investing in Head Start. This work is close to my heart because before I worked in philanthropy, I served in QRIS positions at a state level in Pennsylvania, assessing hundreds of classrooms. And later, I had the privilege to lead an early Head Start program, serving Philadelphia and surrounding counties for many years. At the Trust, our mission is to expand equitable, play-based ideal learning environments for all children and families. And we focus on children and families who are the furthest from opportunity. As a philanthropic partnership, we want to make sure our investments are reaching the communities and children who still need access to loving, nurturing, brain-building, joyful learning environments from prenatal all the way to age 8. So Head Start is a natural place for us to partner and invest. I know as a former EHS director that the adults who come to Head Start, educators and parents, coaches, administrative staff, we're all here because we care deeply about children and families. I know all of us want to create Head Start environments where every child is seen and loved for who they are and supported to grow and develop in close relationship with their family and community. But we need help to get there. At the Trust, our whole mission is rooted in the belief that these ideal learning environments are possible. Early learning environments align with brain science and what parents say they want for their children. They want for them to be happy, safe, successful in school, and successful in life. We know how to do that. I won't read all the principles, but there's common sense. We start with a commitment to racial, linguistic, and cultural ability and equity. Other principles focus on the critical importance of present sensitive relationships, which are even more challenging as we continue to grapple with workforce burnout and crisis. To be clear, ideal learning isn't a curriculum. You'll hear from our panelists all the ways that ideal learning environments come to life. Some may be unfamiliar to you, and some you may recognize from curriculum guides on eClick, but each of them offers something unique and special for children and families. I spent many years doing classroom assessments, so I know that when you walk into an ideal learning environment, no matter what your checklist says, it just feels different. These 9 principles capture that feeling. When children are doing exactly what they're meant to do in these early years, exploring, playing, all with expert support from their educators. It's important to acknowledge that educators are the foundation of every ideal learning environment we know. So as you'll learn on this webinar, these 9 principles come to life in very different ways through a wide variety of formal approaches and community-driven designs. I'm excited for you to hear from my colleagues on our panel. So now I'll hand it over to Annie, who leads our Ideal Learning Head Start Network and much of our work. Annie?
Thank you so much, Tasha. I'm so excited to be here with you all today in this webinar about how in Head Start our ideals are possible. I'm Annie Frazer, Executive Director of Montessori Partnerships for Georgia, which works to expand access to Montessori environments in the state of Georgia, and also co-director of the Ideal Learning Head Start Network. We were really excited to present this webinar, and the reason that the idea came up is because we just completed a resource that the members of the Ideal Learning Head Start Network worked together to create. It's a series of one-pagers called What to Look For in Ideal Learning Head Start Classrooms. And there's a Montessori version, a high scope version, a Tools of the Mind version, a Reggio version, and a Waldorf version. We know these are not the only ways to do ideal learning in Head Start, but these are some really powerful ways, and we were excited to highlight them. And when we completed this series of one-pagers, we said we should do a webinar. Beyond wanting to highlight this series, though, as we started thinking about it, we thought this is really a perfect time to be talking about the importance and the value of ideal learning in Head Start, because there are big changes coming up in the Head Start regulations. There's the possibility of Head Start reauthorization coming up. And really big picture, this is just a time when there's a huge groundswell of interest in early learning and understanding of the critical importance of the early years. So we're super excited to be here with you today, and I know you're going to love hearing from our panelists. Really quick, a little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, we are going to take questions at the end of the webinar, so you can put them in the Q&A. And if the question is for a particular person, please include that person's name in the Q&A box when you put it in there. If you want to share resources with the panelists, you can do that in your chat through the chat function. Also, please look for resources being shared by panelists throughout the webinar in that chat form. Let's see. Finally, the recording will be shared after the webinar. So if you have to get up and miss something, you will be able to see it again, or if you want to share it with others. All right. We have an amazing panel of experts today, people who work with ideal learning approaches, people who work bringing ideal learning to life in Head Start. And I'm super excited to bring their voices to you today. As Tasha mentioned, we know that Head Start providers around the country are nurturing ideal learning environments in their communities, and you're going to get to hear directly from them about how they do it and what it feels like, what it looks like, what the barriers are. In the Ideal Learning Head Start Network, we bring these providers together, share resources, we help each other thoughtfully and equitably deepen this work, and welcome new partners. We know that ideal learning approaches are not yet accessible to every child. My work is in Montessori, and when I mention that there are Montessori Head Start programs, I get a lot of sort of like, wait, really? You can do Head Start in Montessori? Yes, Montessori and other ideal learning approaches can and should be available to all children. And increasingly, they are starting to be. So let's hear directly from our panelists about their programs. I'd like to start with our three panelists who lead Ideal Learning Head Start programs, Leo, Mandy, and Janice. And Leo, I have to give you a special shout out as a co-facilitator of the Ideal Learning Head Start Network. Each of you runs a Head Start program. Each of you chose an ideal learning approach to use within your community. So will you please paint a picture for us of how ideal learning comes to life in your community? And also, I'm going to ask each person as they first speak to start with a brief introduction so we know who you all are.
Thank you, Annie, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody. I'm Leonor Lundholm. People call me Leo. I'm the Director of Education at Child Parent Centers. We're a Head Start, Early Head Start grantee serving approximately 2,700 children in southeastern Arizona. We've been a Reggio-inspired program since about 2008. And one of the things that I want to do is give you a little context for our program to get a sense for how the ideal learning principles are integrated. So in a Reggio-inspired approach, we embrace the idea that teachers and children learn and co-construct knowledge alongside each other. We support the creative culture of inquiry. We use a locally designed curriculum called the Languages of Learning. And it takes into consideration each of the children's learned context and experiences. And teachers plan studies with the children based on the children's or teacher's interest. So an example of recent study was of Susie, the bird who one day flew out of the sky that landed and died on the playground while the children were outdoors playing. The teachers could have easily picked up the bird and buried it or thrown it away. Instead, they listened to the children's questions and pursued a study of the bird that they named Susie. The study had many twists and turns, and the teachers were frankly quite hesitant to talk about the topics that were surfaced from the children, like death, spirituality, heaven, burial rituals. But there was outcomes, many outcomes that came from the study. But one of them was that it gave the children and the parents opportunities to talk about their own experience of loss from COVID. And the teachers responded to the children and the family's social emotional well-being. Articulating this kind of educational approach is sometimes difficult to those who believe that learning is formulated in advance. Where learning and teaching and learning is about predetermined activities linked to learning outcomes. What the ideal learning principles help us do is gives us a framework that helps us to articulate our support in a concise way to our parents, our staff, and also to our stakeholders. So that's one way that we use the framework. And I'm going to pass it to Mandy so she could talk a little more about that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mandy Orlando. I am the Head Start Education Director at Tri-County Head Start, where I've been fortunate to work for the last 15 years. At Tri-County Head Start, we serve 583 students and their families in Southwest Michigan, and our program uses high scope. So our history with the Trust and with Ideal Learning Environment started in 2021 when we transitioned to the high scope curriculum. This year, we were thrilled to be chosen to be part of the Bank Street Coaching Partnership, and we received individualized coaching for myself and our educational leadership team to support ideal learning in our classrooms. So that coaching really helped our team develop a deep understanding of the principles, which we're now sharing with our teachers in very intentional and strength-based ways. So one way that we're doing that is through all of the feedback and the observation that our leadership team gives to our teachers. And making sure that any of that feedback always relates back to one of the principles of ideal learning. So for an example, one of our leaders was recently reviewing the student assessment notes, and she noted to the team that she noticed that their notes were highly individualized and reflected their students' interests and their personalities. So then she also noted to them that's important because it reflects one of our principles, that is, instruction is personalized, and that children learn through relationships. I think Janice is coming up.
Thanks, Mandy. Bonjour, everyone. My name is Janice LaFloe, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Montessori American Indian Child Care Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. The way I'd like to paint a picture for you of our work and our journey is to recognize that it has been a journey. It's been a wonderful journey that truly begins with one of our core values as Native people, which makes it an ideal learning environment because children are valued, and not just valued, but that children are respected as sacred. So who we are in our journey begins with a common understanding as a core value that we get to live every day. That starts with the fact that we consider children as sacred. And so in that role, we build relationships and learn through those important relationships with children. We've designed an environment that is intentional and facilitates a whole lot of exploration, independence, interaction, in a culturally wrapped way. So we get to spend time with our children, linking that information we're sharing and learning about to parents through a monthly newsletter. Because we are an Indigenous Montessori first, we reflect that commitment to equity and to community. And so those are just some of the ways that we begin to explore that journey every day with children through embedding those ideal learning aspects into our environment here. I think I'm handing it back to Annie for the next set of questions.
Yes, indeed. We're now going to turn to Elena and Lynn. You both bring expertise in a particular comprehensive model, each of you. And I'd like to ask if you'd please paint us a picture of how ideal learning looks, how ideal learning comes to life in your approach to early childhood.
Hi, I'm Elena Bodrova, and I'm a co-founder of Tools of the Mind, along with my colleague, Deborah Leon. And talking about our history, we actually started our approach in Head Start classrooms. So I'm so glad that I can share some of our experiences working with Head Start teachers. Tools of the Mind is a combination of early childhood curriculum and professional development programs. So our teachers are not just handed a box of materials, but actually guided through strategies and theory behind those strategies, which is Vygotsky and post-Vygotskian approach to child development. And we realized that we have all of the ideal learning principles in our classrooms even before we knew that they were ideal learning principles, because they are aligned with best practices and best theories as well. And one thing that sets Tools of the Mind apart from other programs is our focus on make-believe play and development of play in young children, which is really important for our theoretical approach, but also important in today's situation when a lot of children don't know how to play, and it deprives them of wonderful benefits of play that we know from research are very important for their development. Okay. Off to Lynn.
Thank you, Annie and all. My name is Lynn Turner, and I am the coordinator of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access for the Waldorf Early Childhood Association of Northern America. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of this wonderful webinar alongside so many colleagues and advocates that are committed to strengthening early childhood and providing ideal learning environments for all children. As we come together, I just want to say that we are committed to the safety, security, health and well-being of all young children everywhere, and we're working very hard to make Waldorf early childhood education an ideal learning experience that's more accessible to all children and can serve and honor the needs of all children and their families, creating a culture of love and healing for young children, our colleagues, the land, and ourselves for generations to come. So I'll tell you a little bit about Waldorf education. Just so you know, it is an approach that's an international approach. We have a very particular understanding of human development, and we see the young child as a being of mind, body, and spirit, of body, soul, and spirit. And so as such, we are kind of the stewards to help nurture that natural development of each child, each unique child. And so that's kind of the understanding that Waldorf teachers who have gone through Waldorf training, weekend approved trainings, understand, and that's an ideal learning principle in itself. We are also one of the main authors of the ideal learning principles that we were a part of that, as well as the nature brief. So a lot of the values that we carry are integrated and, you know, are really seen through all of these different approaches that are represented through the Ideal Learning Roundtable. So with that said, I will just give you also a bit of a pedagogical picture of a Waldorf early childhood environment, what it would look like as a Waldorf-inspired Head Start program. So we'll place this imagination into time and space. So we'll turn to the rhythms of the year and the season. So right now, we think about where we are in time and space. Right here, I'm on the East Coast on Piscataway land. It would certainly be different if we're, you know, with our colleagues that are in the Southern Hemisphere. But where we are right now, we're approaching the winter solstice, which is an astronomical event. It's the darkest day of the calendar year. It's coming up next week. We think about this is something that, you know, our teachers would be understanding. There is a soul quality of that lives in each person. Our connection to outdoors, to the world around us is something that we hold very deeply. So with that said, our seasonal rhythm would be connected to something going on in nature. So you would find children playing outdoors, making sure that they've got their warm mittens on, their coats, their winter bibs. They would be playing freely, joyfully, lots of laughter. If it was snowing outside, they'd be sledding. There'd be songs that we'd be singing that are connecting them to the natural world, that are connecting them to the season of winter. There's a beautiful song called Snow, Snow, Snow that one day I'll hopefully be able to introduce you all to. We'd be going on nature walks. We would be collecting nature items, you know, vines, flowers. The children come back and play with them and turn them into different creations. The teachers might be making wreaths out of evergreen. And, you know, when they come back into the classroom, there would be, you know, time for bathrooming, bodily care, making sure that the children are warm. There would be chamomile tea or some kind of warm tea with honey. You know, the teachers make homemade breads. They make soups with the children, sliced apples. So lots of beautiful, abundant, you know, natural experiences. The children would be playing with all of the materials in the classroom. Well, maybe the teachers would be mending toys. Maybe they'd be polishing their wooden things. Maybe they'll be watering the plants. Just, you know, this kind of activity, busy activity of family life, really. So it's really this, you know, kind of the community of the classroom, of all the children and all their backgrounds being woven in. Parents at this time of the year would be coming into the school for different festivals of light. Again, this, you know, darkest day of the year. So it's really this time of the inner light of the human being. So our candle represents the inner light of ourselves. And there's a beautiful winter spiral that the families are all invited to. And we also celebrate the other holidays of light that are happening around this time. If, you know, the Diwali was just recently happening. So all of these different things are part of the kind of curriculum of the fabric of our culture. And smells, again, you know, the children live into their senses. So smells of cinnamon, clove, lavender, pine, all of these things that really just, you know, lots of images of stars or,
and
you know,
thank
woven
you.
throughout. So that's it. Hopefully that'll give you a picture.
Thank you so much for that
You're welcome.
evocative picture, and to each of our panelists for sharing just a little window into what ideal learning looks like in your environments. We're going to shift now into the question about challenges faced and overcome. We know that it hasn't always been easy to bring ideal learning into a situation where it's easily accessible by all families. We know that Head Start providers have sometimes been hesitant to implement ideal learning approaches because of misconceptions about curricular requirements. We know that Head Start program specialists, even program administrators, are sometimes less familiar with ideal learning approaches than with other models. But despite these barriers, we know families and communities want equitable and affordable access to ideal learning environments. So the question I want to turn to now for our panelists is, what challenges or barriers have you encountered in your work? And how have you managed to meet Head Start requirements while staying true to your ideal learning approach?
I should probably start. One of the things that
I'm sorry, actually, Elena, we're gonna start with Janice on this one.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thanks, Annie. Our journey and challenges in moving and becoming a Head Start partner make us a little bit more unique. We are not a full-fledged Head Start. We are a community provider that contracts with the county Head Start to deliver and serve American Indian children in St. Paul. And so one of the first challenges that we faced in that journey at the beginning was the idea of all of the assessments that needed to be conducted and held to, and the Head Start measurement standards. So our initial conversation was, sure, we'd love to partner, Janice. Would you like to meet our 1,700 Head Start standards? And I was like, well, maybe not. And so it was okay, thanks. But what we did in that first year was we did have to become, in Minnesota, we had to become parent aware rating. And so in that process, we got our 4-star parent aware rating, right? And about a year later, went back to Head Start, and they're like, you have your parent aware rating? Yay! Then there's not much else left you have to do to create this partnership. And so at the very beginning, it really was initially this thought of all these standards. But in reality, the Montessori approach already met and exceeded many, many of those Head Start standards. And so embedding language and embedding Montessori into our Head Start relationship to establish that partnership was really the partnership with Head Start has become a supportive means at this point for us to do our work together. As a small agency, we have had to count on Head Start to provide those other wraparound resources that we can't provide on site. So that's developed into a healthy relationship and a long-term partnership. But initially, I have to be honest, it was a bit scary, but I encourage you to be brave in that effort, because it really can be crosswalked and wrapped to work better. And now I think we're going to Elena.
To Leo next. Let's go to Leo next.
Oh, Leo next. Thanks.
Thank you, Janice. I love what you're saying, that this has been a journey and that there are so many pieces in place already where the performance standards and the requirements fit within our approach and with the ideal learning Head Start, the ideal learning principles. You know, this is a tough question for me when we talk about barriers, because as I reflect through the last 15 years through our own journey, I can think of many barriers that we've had to overcome. And I'll just give you one example. And this one is around our school readiness goal. We intentionally wrote our school readiness goal to include all children. And our goal reads as the following: 100% of all infants, toddlers, and preschoolers will demonstrate developmental progress in all learning domains over the course of the program year. Big, broad school readiness goal. So the guidance from the Office of Head Start says that grantees must set goals for improving school readiness for all children birth through 5 by aligning school readiness goals with the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes Framework and your state standards. So we have this big, broad goal. We have what we think is really just respectful of all children. And then we have to articulate to the reviewers how we're meeting our school readiness goals. Well, we've managed to meet that requirement, but you know, it took a lot of conferring with the researchers from My Teaching Strategies, which is the assessment that we use, meeting with consultants, looking for support from some data analysts to really come to this point where we can fully say that our big, beautiful, broad goal that's inclusive of all children meets the performance standard of the school readiness goal. And then over the years, we've evolved to have, and we've recently begun to use our data stories or our studies to convey how children are developing and progressing through their own development. So it's a beautiful example of how we use our qualitative data to show how we're meeting our school readiness goal. So that's just one example of many of the barriers. But I think what Janice is saying is true. We can figure this out. It can be done. And that's part of the goal of the network, is to kind of meet and support and help each other figure this out. So I'll pass it to Mandy so she can share her example.
Thank you. So for us at Tri-County Head Start, the biggest challenges we faced transitioning to ideal learning with high scope was the financial investment. And along with that, the mind shift and the adjustment for our teachers to a brand new teaching model. So we kind of tackled both of those issues together. We started our transition to high scope with a 3-classroom pilot. And when we did that, we saw increased class scores. We saw increases in our student outcomes and the overall teacher engagement in those classrooms. All were just phenomenal. So we knew at that point we had found our curriculum and what we wanted to use, but the financial challenge still there. So we created a long-term plan for training, and we decided to train a specific number of teachers each year, and just keep rolling with that year after year. It was then that I found the Trust for Learning, and I applied for and then was awarded some funds from the trust. Thank you, which we put towards training, and really that put us on a pathway to achieving those goals quickly. And now that all of our teaching teams have been trained, our new goal that we've set for ourselves is to have a curriculum specialist on staff that can help us with all of our on-site training, as well as partnering with our communities. So a couple of other area agencies use our curriculum too. So just being able to partner with them. So our other challenge entering that was ensuring that our staff fully understood and practiced the curriculum. As we know that having a training, there's a big difference in having a training and then actually practicing it to fidelity and with a personal investment in that approach. But what happened actually as a result of our long-term training plan was that we had 27 different Head Start teachers who were all in different stages and levels of their training and their understanding and their implementation, and they supported each other, and they were excited. They got each other excited about the transition. So during that transition, we had people who were using 2 different curriculums, and people who were not using high scope yet were already putting some of the practices into their daily routines because they were so excited about it. And what we first thought of was, this is going to take a long time, this is going to be a challenge, really ended up creating a very nice learning community within our agency, and really supported the principle that says that continuous learning environments support our adult development.
Thank you so much. I love hearing about that. And that kind of mutual support is also what the Ideal Learning Head Start Network is all about. Lynn and Elena, you each have kind of a unique perspective on this question. Elena, because Tools of the Mind is a program that many Head Start providers have chosen. And as you mentioned, it really began with Head Start. And Lynn, Waldorf is just at the very beginning of reaching into Head Start, not yet available for kids and practitioners, although we know of at least one Head Start provider that's beginning to implement Waldorf principles. So Elena, I want to hear your perspective on what the barriers are really briefly, and then Lynn, yours as well.
Okay, thank you, Annie. One of the barriers that we had to face from the very beginning is probably like some barriers were common to all early childhood programs, like the increasing pressure they all feel from kindergarten and K-12 in general to emphasize pre-academics. But Head Start unique barriers, there are several of them. One of them is that a lot of Head Start programs, they actually are funded from multiple sources. They're they're called braided. And as a result, teachers have to fill out multiple sets of paperwork and comply to all kinds of regulations that really takes time away from teaching. And one of the things that it actually made us do is design strategies and activities in such a way that there would be multiple benefits from each strategy, and there would be multiple children's abilities and competencies promoted within the same activity. For example, we made sure that a lot of activities that may be having primary focus on literacy or math, or maybe even fine motor skills, have a component of self-regulation built in, so that children, when they engage in those activities, they also develop self-regulation. And it's one of the major emphasis of our program is helping children to develop executive functions and self-regulation. And we started doing it even before those competencies became part of Head Start performance standards. So in a sense, it's easy for us to make sure that Head Start teachers move children toward school readiness and in terms of self-regulation as well. Another barrier that is also common to many early childhood programs, but is especially important for Head Start, is the fact that it's very hard to get all teachers, and especially all teacher assistants, to trainings because of the substitute problem. And we believe in Tools of the Mind that all adults that come into contact with little children have to be on the same page when it comes to promoting their learning and development. So as a result, we developed a whole set of technological tools that allow both online and offline support for our teachers and all adults that interact with children in Head Start programs, so that they can get timely support from our staff and understand why they are doing things the way they're doing it in Tools of the Mind. So that would be probably my advice to Lynn, to make sure that as they are entering Head Start programs with their program, they make sure that teachers understand that all of their activities are also multi-pronged ones, and children don't just learn one thing, but they learn many things, and they don't have to be just added on top of each other, but can be integrated as they are in Waldorf program as well.
Thanks, and we'll turn it over to Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Elena, and thank you, Annie. I would say definitely one of the main barriers for our involvement has really just been the fact that we have been part of the private sector for so much in the United States. You know, in Europe, most of the Waldorf programs are publicly funded programs, but in the United States, many of our programs are private, and so they are very exclusive for people who have money to be able to pay for Waldorf education. And so that's been a barrier. And then, you know, just in general, resources, human and infrastructure resources have been limited in our ability to be able to reach out to start doing the work to make sure that all of our teachers that are trained in our 16 teacher training programs in the United States, Canada, and Mexico are recognized by the state. So that's an area that we're working on right now to make sure that our teachers that are trained, that go through very rigorous 3-year trainings, that they are recognized as long, you know, as well as the similar situation that Montessori has had to go through. So that's an area that we're going through now. But I will say that we are finding low-hanging fruit that is allowing us to be able to engage in the conversation and build bridges. You know, one example is us being part of the Ideal Learning Roundtable and really coming together with other experts that are supporting pedagogical approaches that are best practices for children, and learning from each other and finding ways that we can weave, you know, our knowledge together to strengthen what we know is best for all children. And so we now have one of our programs, so we can, as a membership organization, so we work with teacher training institutes. We kind of are the accrediting body, but we don't accredit, it's kind of a recognition, but also member organizations and groups. And so right now we have one particular school, the Acorn School, which is in New York, and it is one of the, it's our first program, kind of a pilot, that has partnered during COVID with a Head Start program in its community. And they have been able to work as a mentor for the Head Start program and help them to develop a relationship with outdoors and really find the needs that that community needs, working alongside a Waldorf institution. And so we're hoping that we can create more of these kind of collaborative relationships and build partnerships with other Head Start programs across the nation, and in a capacity of kind of mentorship and also just support and learning together, until we can get ourselves in a place where we are, you know, able to open up our own Head Start programs. But we are definitely, you know, all about equity and access and our commitment. The board, you can read the weekend board statement on our weekend website, our diversity statement that just shows, you know, our commitment to this.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So having heard about what it looks like, what the barriers may be, we're excited to think about the future of Head Start. We all know that at some point in the future, reauthorization will be on the horizon for Head Start. And just in the last few weeks, we've seen some movement at the federal level with proposed rulemaking about compensation, about recruitment, mental health, and also quality and equity of access. So this is a pretty pivotal time for providers and administrators to work together. because we know that with all these changes coming, could come some new opportunities for ideal learning approaches within Head Start. So the next question, and this is going to be my final question for the panelists before you all get to ask questions. So if you have questions, you can throw them in the Q&A. If you put them in the chat, we might miss them. So put them in the Q&A, your questions for the presenters. I'm going to ask my last question, which is this. With these proposed changes on the table in the next 60 days, including the focus on the workforce, on mental health, and then on equitable access to quality, the question I have for you is, what can ideal learning approaches bring to the table in any one of these areas? And I'll ask each any panelist who wants to chime in on this, just really briefly, to take one of those areas and expand on it a little.
Can I just jump on the mental health issue? I think what's important in terms of promoting mental health of children and staff is focus on their agency. And I'm not talking about adults now, it's a totally different topic, but I'm talking about children and the fact that all of the ideal learning approaches value children's agency and their independent activity. And there has been a recently published paper in Journal of Pediatrics connecting the lack of independent activities with future problems in mental health of children and adolescents. So I think that focusing on children's sense of agency is something that actually is featured in all of the ideal learning approaches and what sets it apart from many not so ideal learning approaches. So that's what my 2 cents. Okay. Any other panelists want to contribute to that?
I'd love to share a little bit about how we continue to build equitable access to high quality. Because I come from a community that is often very, very invisible, what has and can exist is that Head Start is and around in tribal communities. And it is and can be an avenue to raise quality. Our children and all children deserve the best we have to offer. And I would hope that with the opportunity of Head Start being such an important nationwide resource, that we could challenge ourselves to create access and make it equitable and do and obtain partnerships that can bring in ideal learning aspects and partnerships into those Head Start environments. Thanks.
I'll share. So for me, I think that the changes that we're seeing in the standards, I think, are so positive and really address issues that a lot of our programs are facing. I am so grateful for the focus on mental health and the multidisciplinary team approach to mental health for our students and our teachers. And I think that we have a similar team in place here at Tri-County Head Start. We call our interdisciplinary team, but I'm just so excited to see the mental health part of it and that it's supporting our teachers and our students. And it fits so beautifully into all of our ideal learning approaches and environments in Montessori and High Scope and Tools of the Mind, because all of our approaches really start with relationships and the social emotional health piece.
So one of the intentions of the ideal learning principles is to enable educators and those that work with them to build a community that represents shared principles of quality in early childhood education. The principles represent core concepts and ask us to be responsible with our perspectives, to be aware of the ways in which we influence what we see, hear, and how we behave. The principles invite us to be attentive to the children, the families, and the staff, and to be accountable for our own cultural lens. Imagine if the principles stood side by side with the policymakers as they consider future changes to the workforce support, to child safety and family engagement. I believe it could be a mechanism for reimagining what we do now in the early childhood field.
Thank you so much. I really do think that all of our ideal learning approaches have so much to offer in this moment as we respond to the proposed changes that Head Start has suggested, and as we help guide and shape the movement of Head Start into the future. We're going to go ahead and shift over to take your questions now. And one question that has arisen is in regards to mental health. Can you speak to how your approaches to education can support anti-bias education? And I'm going to just throw that out there for any of our panelists who want to jump in on that.
Okay, let me jump with a slightly different angle. I like to think in terms of pro rather than anti. So I would talk about what we do as like pro community, because when there is community, there is no bias. We aim to build a community of learners in every single classroom so that all children see each other as a friend and part of this bigger community. So it's built in design of our activities so that children learn to cooperate with every single child in the classroom, whether this child is non-English speakers, has serious disability, or is simply new, doesn't know anyone. So we want all children to treat each other as friends and somebody who helps them and who they can help. So as a result, we want all children to be actually parts of this community that shares their ideas, their emotions, and their beliefs. And in this community, we see that there would be no place for bias of any kind. If you want any practical example of that is in many of our activities, teachers rotate children so they get an experience of playing or working on some project with every single child in the classroom, not just self-selected groups. So that is one of the strategies that we use. Okay,
Does anybody else want to answer that question before we jump to another one?
Annie, can you say the question again? Because I had a little bit of a difficulty understanding what it was that they were actually asking.
The question was connecting mental health to anti-bias education. And it was about how our different approaches can support mental health and help reduce bias in our classrooms.
Mm-hmm. I guess for me, I think of, identity as an important piece with that. And I think mental health, we're feeling like we're belonging if we're able to be seen. So I think as part of the curriculum that would embrace all people, an anti-biased approach or culturally responsive curriculum, you're making space for every voice to be heard or every identity to be witnessed and to be celebrated. So within the Waldorf education, approach, each constellation of children in each class is going to be different. So you might have children, representing different religions, different races, and making sure that you're celebrating each one. I mean, our teachers go through extensive anti-bias training now and are really, learning to understand what it is that their narratives are, and what their biases are because of, our own intersection. So the more that we can really do the inner work of understanding ourselves and our own perspectives will help us to be able to meet each other. I shouldn't say other because that's again, but so meet each other in a way that really is constructive and really with wonder and curiosity, right? So I think it's just going to depend, but hopefully, we're all in a place where we recognize that we can actually create more harm by being ignorant to our own bias. And we're in a place where we're, you know, all learning together. There's many things that we all don't know. So thank you.
This emphasis on the importance of teacher training, it sort of runs throughout all that we do. We have another question that touches on that as well, which is, how do you plan to continue to provide resources and trainings to teachers in order to ensure high fidelity of implementation? And how will you measure fidelity? And this is very different for each of your programs. So let's throw it out there to anybody who hasn't said anything in a while. Jump in there, and will you talk about resources and trainings for teachers and how you ensure fidelity?
I'll start, Annie. So as an agency, we're Reggio inspired, and it isn't easy to find experts in that area. And so we're always having to look for consultants that are well-versed in the Reggio approach. And with that, that means that our own educational staff, including myself, have to stay on top of the approach and learning deeper about the essence of it. So first it begins with that. How do we keep ourselves up to date? And then the second part is in how do we share that ongoing information with our teachers? And we're committed to monthly curriculum planning days. We're committed to ongoing professional development days as well. And that structure is embedded in our calendar. They're calendarized. So that's one way that we've done that.
Janice, did you want to chime in on that as well?
When I think about this, I think it always comes down to some of the most simple responses in how we support adult learning. If you are truly a lifelong learner, then you love and enjoy learning, and you support your teachers in all aspects of how they continue to learn. Officially and formally, you're required in Minnesota to continue your continuing education each year. And so those give you small snippets and opportunities to connect externally to other entities that offer opportunity. But I also want to emphasize the significance of truly understanding the relationship with children and your coworkers. All healthy solutions come from keeping things sincere and simple in those core relationships that you're building. And valuing lifelong learning eludes often from children and can elude from us as adults. And so when we pass and we share that love of learning, parents become key partners in that effort. And so as much as official learning and certified learning is important, professional development can also mean those informal ways of sharing knowledge amongst each other as professionals that don't always look like credential pieces of paper. So please remember, there's always room for learning from each other as well.
I feel like that's been a theme I'm hearing from all of these programs about like the beautiful reciprocal learning between children and adults. That our education is not like it's not a one-directional thing that comes from the adult to the child. We're in reciprocal learning relationships, children with each other, adults learning from children, and children from adults. And I feel like you're bringing in the piece, Janice, about adults learning from each other and sharing with each other as well. So such a beautiful vision that you all are casting. I want to thank you all so much for having been here and been part of this panel to share your experience and your wisdom. I'm going to turn it over to Tasha to thank our audience as well and to wrap up with a few final things.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, everybody. Each of you were so wonderful, and I always learn so much from you. When we meet in our Idle Learning Head Start Network meetings or anytime I come across you. So thank you so much. And I hope that the audience learned so much from you too. I want to share that there will be a recording coming soon. So please check our website in the next week or so. And it will be posted also to Trust for Learning has a YouTube site. So please keep an eye out for that recording. And I also want to say, we talked a lot about the Idle Learning Head Start Network. Our network is 43 members strong and growing. We meet monthly virtually and come together in person in the summer. You heard Mandy talk about resources such as coaching and grants that she was able to access. And you heard Leo reflecting about how she thought about her school readiness goals and how she manages that and learns from others and teaches others in our network. So that's what we do. We're a very supportive community. If you are using one of the approaches that were featured in this webinar, or if you're Ideal Learning curious, I invite you to check out our Head Start Network resources on Trust for Learning's website. And please reach out to me directly if you are interested in joining. Also, please follow the Trust on social media and subscribe to our newsletter for lots of other information, lots of Ideal Learning resources, not just Head Start. And please, definitely reach out and stay in touch. Thanks everybody for coming.